Hi, my name is Laura Donnelly, and I am honored to be joining the Badmouth reading series. Thanks so much to Rebecca Aronson for the invitation. I'm coming to you from upstate New York, near the shore of Lake Ontario, and we are just tilting into fall here. In fact, I think the equinox is tomorrow. So I thought I'd read some poems that have some connection to this season. Um, Keats' Season of Mist and Mellow Fruitfulness. So again, I live in upstate New York, but I grew up in Michigan. And this first poem I'm going to read comes from there and from around this time of year, which is when the sandhill cranes are migrating through Michigan. And there are fields you could go to see, there's hundreds of them there. And people used to gather to see them. I'm sure they still do. So this is titled Calls. And it's in the most recent issue of Colorado Review, so thanks to them. And the poem is for my brother. Calls. Years ago, my grandfather asked us to come with him to see the sandhill cranes. I was 8 and not interested. Didn't know he'd die in 6 months. A purring, almost, heard as we sat around the fire, and my brother said, "Look up." We had somehow become adults. 37 cranes like a jackknife in the sky, then a sound like a whinny from another direction. Early evening, mid-fall, strange sounds for the middle of town. A screech owl, my brother said, and I didn't believe him. "Look it up," he said. But already the bats were clicking their confirmation. This next poem is called Matins, and Matins refers to the early prayer service. Matins. A bicycle behind me coming down the sidewalk, but when I turn, it's just leaves in one sweep of the wind. Not a long walk, this downhill stretch, ending at the river where plastic bags snag in tall trees. And then birds, small and black, rise from the trees in a scatter that turns to a line going back to its source. A chimney, a small point where they disappear. Nothing off balance about it. I was walking to my car. No one was in the leaves. So this next poem isn't technically a fall poem. It's a squirrel poem, but I figure squirrels are timeless, really, so I'm adding it to the mix. This poem's title is "At This Girl is a Squirrel," which is the Instagram handle for a squirrel that I follow, whose actual name is Jill the squirrel. At This Girl is a Squirrel. I joined Instagram for the animals. Videos my friend Christine sends of juniper and mushroom, fox and possum, Buff and his fellow guinea pigs. But it's Jill who clinches it. Rescue squirrel flung from her nest down the winds of Hurricane Isaac. Christine and I talk of the animals like mutual friends. How Jill tucks her tail when she settles to eat. How she stands on tiptoe to inspect the fake tree. It's not uncommon for baby squirrels to fall, but to live through that storm. They thought she'd stay for a month, but she never left. I'm not sure which I love more, the idea of the small beast curled in my palm, or the journey from fall to safety. As a child, I imagined life in a burrow at the base of a tree, a squirrel home, I thought, not knowing their nest swayed above. But I'd read My Side of the Mountain, and I knew such a den would be fine. A bed and a trunk, a small fire. I'd cozy inside all winter while the snow swirled over the world. A far cry from Jill's morning cardio across the couch back, leaping to her person's outstretched hand. When they sit in the sun, Jill melts to the human arm, lazes as any sunbather would, flipping back her ears to cool off. Jill's person rarely shows her own face, so we imagine we're the ones holding Jill. The smooth warmth of her belly, her long, dainty claws, how she likes to hold the spoon when she licks the last of the yogurt. More than 700,000 followers. When she hasn't posted in a few days, Christine and I call one another in worry. Look up the lifespan of squirrels, up to 20 years, thank goodness. Then she's back, napping in the folds of her person's collar, and something, though we're not sure what, feels right with the world. So I thought I'd also read some poems from my book, Midwest Gothic, which came out in 2020 at the height of the pandemic. And I've been so grateful to online series like this one that have let this book have a life in the world despite it launching during a lockdown. The book explores family, religion, mother-daughter stories, and also questions of what we keep and what we leave behind of the places that we're from. And threading through the book, there's a series of poems about plants, which I think of as kind of a garden ekphrasis. And this poem is one of those. It's titled Primula vulgaris, which is the Latin name for primrose. And a side note for folks who don't garden, fall is a really good time for transplanting plants because the plants are about to go dormant anyways for winter. And that means they'll have time for the roots to settle. They don't have to put all that energy into leaves and flowers. And I love how rest is an important part of the garden cycle. Also, I mentioned a couple of fertilizers in here, and organic fertilizers are a pretty gruesome mix of things. So this is Primula vulgaris, primrose. Add compost, manure, the pulverized feathers of chickens condensed into bags with names like flower tone, holly tone. Some that come right out say blood meal. Grandmother does not want to leave her house for the nursing home. Mother does not want to leave her house for the divorce. Fist size and still green against November's frost. Each plant's roots are briefly exposed. Our favorites bloom fuchsia with yellow centers, wild as cat's eyes and bright as slits of flame. Blood and bone, I prepare earth, separate and transplant the primrose. In the dreams, I grind feathers and spade their powdery remains into still warm soil. And I'll read one of the other flower poems in the book. This is titled Calendula officinalis, which is the Latin name for marigold. After their third daughter, Marigold, died, the Churchills named their next child Mary. Echo with difference, the gold worn off, or no longer a shade they dared name. If I had 50 daughters, I think I'd name them all Marigold. Not nature's first green, but still gold late in August. Crinoline layers of orange and sienna, like ruffled flamenco hems. A strong flower, planted near tomatoes to protect against pest. When I snip finished blooms, the stalks breathe a peppery scent. And then I thought I'd read a harvest poem. This is called The Last Supper, and it's from near the end of my work on this book. I had the opportunity to visit the house where my grandfather was born and where a great aunt still lived. And this is from that experience. The Last Supper. Great Aunt Gert spreads the table with thick, sliced tomatoes, mashed potatoes and gravy, meatballs, white bread, corn on the cob she picked from the garden we passed when we turned up the driveway. An angel food cake rests in its round tin. My boys take care of me, says Aunt Gert, who lives alone at 91. At 18, she married Grandpa Philip's brother. Don't ever live with your in-laws, she laughs, glancing near the ceiling, the room upstairs where she and Otto and the baby all slept. She'll be dead in a year, but today she is sharper than either of us. We've come for an old woman's stories, and she has been waiting. She tells how the barn collapsed like a lung, the milking tanks lost beneath shingles. It wasn't the lightning but wind that took it. I'm sorry, she says. Should have warned you on the phone before you came. But remember that storm in the 50s? The whole herd struck, current bouncing between. Somewhere there's a newspaper clipping. Remember, she urges my mother, when Grandpa Toby ran off the banker with a pitchfork, and that preacher who treated his family so bad, the whole town knew. She stares hard at my mother. We don't talk of Uncle Otto's affair. We don't talk of how my mother fled this place. We know. And the knowing swells like the chainsaw song of cicadas buzzing through heat. It grows large around the milk jug left on the table and the TV droning from the next room. It grows large as summer unzipped from the earth, how it won't be contained. It fills and takes. Soon, Aunt Gert says, but I am not afraid. She sighs herself up from the long kitchen table. She will not let us leave empty. And I'm going to read just one more poem, a newer one. This final poem is titled Elemental, and gratitude to the Ohio State University's magazine, The Journal, for originally publishing it. I was reading a biography of Emily Dickinson around the time I was writing this, and there are a couple Dickinson nods in the poem, the speaking slant and the woman who spent decades apart. Elemental. To wake in the dark to rain when the world is equinoctial, the rabbits not yet nibbling neighborhood yards. Fall, I should have said, and the full moon imminent, but not yet. And anyway, such clouds. The rain is a blanket or the rain is an eye. The line is a running stitch or perforation, the instruction to tear on the dotted. But this is about rain and waking. My need for the about. I would like perhaps to speak plainly by speaking at a slant. Months of drought, I should have said, but it's impossible ever to tell the whole backstory. Why is it that a woman spent decades apart from all but a few? A house, a sister, a tornado or two. The weather is never just the weather, and yet elemental from the start. Thanks again so much for having me, and be well.